Hi everyone, welcome to TESL 330. This is our first and second session. This session is a combination of week 1 and week 2. In this session, we'll be diving into some foundational concepts of CAL, computer-assisted language learning. We will overview some core CAL principles, focus specifically on vocabulary as our target topic, and start making connections between theory and practice. We'll also be reviewing key ideas, contextualizing vocabulary learning within the CAL framework, and taking time to pause and reflect on what this all means for language teaching. In addition, there will be chances to vote, share ideas, and discuss how these principles apply to real classroom contexts. So let's get started. Let's start by defining CAL, which stands for Computer-Assisted Language Learning. How do you define CAL? CAL definitions differ because the concept isn't just one thing. It spans software, web tools, apps, AI, and more, and all of which aimed at supporting language learning. That's also why you'll see many terms used in the literature like technology-enhanced language learning, mobile-assisted language learning, digital learning, and many more, and each of which emphasizes slightly different modes or tools. One way to frame CAL is by looking at how learners interact with technology. In this sense, Egbert and Shahrokni 2018 introduced a nice, very effective framework. They say learning occurs with technology, meaning that tech can be the tutor, or learning can occur through technology, which means tech can be the tool. And the last one, learning occurs around technology, which means technology provides the environment for communication. As a reflection point, educators or practitioners using CAL should be prepared to meet a wide range of learners' needs, both in terms of tech skills and language goals. Now we've set the stage for what CAL is and what the concept is about. Now let's look at the language learning principles that guide how CAL is designed and utilized. There are 5 core principles coming from second language acquisition research which guide effective CAL design. First, we have comprehensible input. According to comprehensible input, learners need language that's just beyond their current level of proficiency, but still understandable, often with some support like visual aids or simplified text. Second is output. It's not enough to just consume language. Learners need chances to produce it, whether that's speaking, writing, or interacting. Third is noticing. Learners must notice how language is used, whether it's a grammar pattern, a collocation, or a new word. Fourth is interaction, which means learning is more than just clicking buttons, simply put. It's the back and forth of input, output, and negotiation of meaning, something that a good CAL tool should enable. Finally, we have feedback. Automated or teacher-driven feedback helps learners adjust and refine their understanding and usage. In addition to these foundational principles, we also need to think how tasks are designed, which takes us to the second set of CAL principles. And now let's talk about task engagement. In task engagement, we have 3 principles. The first is authenticity. Simply put, tasks should feel real, meaningful, and connected to how language is used outside the classroom. Second is autonomy. I forgot to mark number 1. All right, second one, autonomy or self-regulation. CAL tools should support different levels of learner control, from free exploration, let's call it wild, to structured tasks, to something in between. And finally, we have scaffolding. This is where we gradually build up difficulty, giving just enough support at the start and reducing support as learners gain confidence and mastery. So we have 3 task engagement principles: authenticity, autonomy, and scaffolding. And that brings us to key principles of educational technology in second language classrooms. First, technology should serve the pedagogy, not the other way around. The tools you choose should help achieve the goals of the course and curriculum. Second, make sure the tools are compatible with your learners' needs, interests, proficiency levels, digital literacy, and even learning preferences. Technology should be seen as a tool, the third one. Technology should be seen as a tool, not as a replacement for the teacher. Technology should be there to support, not to dominate instruction. And finally, use technology effectively and efficiently. Well, the questions you might ask yourself: does the tool actually help learning? Or does it save time, streamline tasks, or reduce cognitive load? Well, these are the questions you can ask yourself when using or choosing a tool. Of all areas in language learning, vocabulary, our topic today, is where CAL can actually make a difference. Now let's talk about why vocabulary instruction matters so much. All right, let's talk a little bit about vocabulary. Vocabulary is often referred to as the building block of language. Without vocabulary, learners can't express ideas, understand input, or engage meaningfully. Many argue that vocabulary is the most aspect of language learning, sometimes even more important than grammar in many communicative contexts. Learners can often get by with imperfect grammar, but not without the right words, right? So, vocabulary learning is really important, no doubt. But some questions: how do learners actually pick it up? And how should we teach it? So, speaking of the importance of vocabulary, I would like to know your opinion on the following statement. If I know the meaning of a word, I can say that I know that word. So please share your response in the chat box, or if you're watching the lecture on YouTube, you can share your response in the comments. Regarding the previous statement, my answer would most likely be disagree, or even strongly disagree, for the following reasons. When we say I know a word, we often just mean we know its meaning. But vocabulary knowledge goes beyond that. To truly know a word, you need to understand several different aspects. And that includes how frequently the word appears in language use. Is it common in everyday speech or mostly in formal writing? You also need to know its spoken form, how it's pronounced, and also its written form as well. Then there is connotation, like what kind of association the word carries. For example, mourn is strongly linked to grief, loss, and funerals. You also need to be aware of the register. Is it formal, informal, spoken, written, or used more in specific contexts? There is also the grammatical behavior of the word. Is it used as a verb, noun, or both? And finally, word family or derivations like mourner, mourning, or mourned. So again, when we talk about vocabulary knowledge, we're talking about a complex, multi-layered understanding, not just definitions. Now let's spark some reflection and discussion. First, how do L2 learners acquire vocabulary? Is it through exposure, repetition, or explicit instruction? Now let's move on to methods. How should vocabulary be taught? What methods are most effective? Explicit teaching, incidental learning, spaced repetition, or maybe a mix. And finally, consider the learner's side. What strategies can they use? Flashcards, apps, reading, keeping a word journal, or any other methods you might have in mind? All right, to wrap up this part, we need to go over this important statement again. Vocabulary growth isn't just the teacher's job. Learners need to be active participants. They need to be actively engaging in the vocabulary learning process, and choose and find out the strategies that work best for them. All right, please take a moment to think about these questions. We'll get back to them in our next discussion or in the forum. You can take this and work on them for the forum activity. So far, we've talked about why vocabulary matters and how it's learned. But what does research actually say about the process? According to Nation 2001, there are two key findings standing out. First, learners receive insufficient exposure to words in the input they hear and read. Even if students are regularly reading or listening in the target language, they often don't encounter new words enough times to actually grasp them. Repeated, meaningful encounters with words are quite rare, especially for low-frequency vocabulary. Second, there is this wrong guesses thing. When learners try to infer meaning from context, there is a high likelihood of wrong guesses. Guessing isn't always a reliable thing. If the surrounding context isn't clear enough or the learner lacks background knowledge, they might assign the wrong meaning. And that's not what the teacher is looking for, right? Because that incorrect understanding can stick. These 2 points challenge the assumption that exposure and guessing are always enough, because they tell us that we can't rely only on passive input or incidental learning when it comes to vocabulary. So what does that mean for us as teachers or material developers? Let's take a look at the implications. These findings from Falls 2004 give us 3 important takeaways. First is the role of guessing. Students don't reliably learn new vocabulary items just by guessing meanings. And this is in coherence with what Nation said. Context is important, is helpful, but not always enough. We need to move beyond the idea that the students will just pick up words over time. The second is the role of explicit learning and teaching. What does that mean, explicit learning? It means teaching word meanings must be intentional and contextualized. And it's not just word meanings. Pronunciation should be taught, usage should be taught, collocation should be taught, and many more. And that teaching must be on purpose and in context. So it's not all about presenting vocabulary items. It's about helping learners utilize them practically. And finally is the use of other languages, or maybe L1, I would say. Using the strategic use of L1 can help students reinforce vocabulary learning or vocabulary gains. And this is quite important, especially when it comes to the clarification of subtle differences in meanings. So, these studies encourage us to be more intentional about teaching vocabulary, not just hoping it'll happen over time. All right, time to vote. Here is the statement I would like to know your opinion on. The use of L1 translations should be used in vocabulary teaching. So I would like to know your take on this. Either you agree, disagree, share it in the chat box, or again, if you're watching this on YouTube, share your response in the comments. And also we could consider when is the use of L1 translations most appropriate. So what should teachers actually do when it comes to vocabulary instruction? The first step is to explicitly introduce vocabulary. This means we don't just hope learners will pick it up. We intentionally highlight keywords and phrases they'll need for comprehension or communication. Second is support. We need to support understanding. And that support might come in the form of translations, examples, definitions, visuals, and so on and so forth. And the ultimate goal is to help learners move from just seeing a word to actually grasping how it works in context. And finally is the practice. We need to make sure learners get practice, and better to say guided practice, because vocabulary doesn't stick without repeated use. Guided practice could be like sentence completion, where students are expected to use new words. So, to wrap up, introduce vocabulary explicitly, provide support for understanding, and reinforce. These are the three basic components of the cycle. Now that we've covered the teacher's role, let's get specific. If you're teaching vocabulary with CAL, computer-assisted language learning, what are the best practices? In this slide, we want to learn 5 solid tips suggested by Chappell and Jamieson on how to use tech tools for teaching vocabulary. Number 1, choose CAL materials that explicitly teach vocabulary. This is quite important because this is not just about using a flashy app. We need to look for tools that are intentional in teaching, in their vocabulary teaching. Number 2, provide learners with opportunities for interaction with the computer, whether that's through clickable definitions, audio playbacks, or feedback generating tasks. And number 3 is to design tasks that encourage interaction among learners, not just with the computer. And that could be discussions, peer review, vocabulary games done in pairs or groups. Number 4, include evaluations, so learners know how they are doing, and that might mean feedback on quizzes or automated responses in language apps. And number 5 is to help learners build strategies. For example, using online dictionaries, word banks, collocation dictionaries, concordances, so on and so forth. We shouldn't assume learners know how to use these tools well, right? Anyways, these are really important tips for not only for tech integration, there are tips for making vocabulary learning stick in a digital environment. So now let's dive into the first step and see what it looks like in practice. Tip number 1, choose CAL tools or materials that explicitly teach vocabulary. When choosing CAL tools, make sure they don't just show words, but actually help learners engage with the words explicitly and in a structured way. And that includes showing words in context, using images, translations, synonyms, and sample sentences. And also it includes offering guided practice like interactive tasks where learners match words to meanings, complete sentences, or use new vocabulary in context. In other words, the tool we choose should provide both input and output opportunities, supported and complemented with feedback. And that brings us to the second tip, which is providing learners with opportunities for interaction with the computer. When students learn vocabulary using CAL tools, they shouldn't just be passively consuming information. Instead, they should be actively engaging and interacting with it. And this could mean looking up word meanings right after they encounter them in reading or listening, or doing interactive vocabulary exercises like matching games or fill in the blank quizzes. The more hands-on and immediate the interaction, the more likely the vocabulary will stick. And that brings us to tip number 3. Let vocabulary tasks spark interaction among learners. Call tools don't just have to be about one person and a screen. Good vocabulary tasks can actually spark interaction. For example, they can encourage students to work together to explain words, discuss how they're used in context, or even debate subtle differences in meaning. So these peer-to-peer conversations can deepen understanding and help with long-term retention. So when designing call tasks, always think about how they can prompt interaction, not just with the computer, but with each other. After that, we need to consider the importance of evaluations. One of the advantages of call tools is that they can give learners immediate feedback, whether it's through quizzes, matching tasks, or drag and drop exercises, or like your interaction with ASR, automatic speech recognition, where the user receives immediate feedback in the form of text, which is technically called a developing text. These assessments help learners see what they've learned, what they've mastered, and where they still need work. In addition, immediate feedback generated by the computer tool can be very motivating and engaging and keep learners on track. And now let's move on to tip number 5, which is helping learners develop strategies for vocabulary learning independently. You don't want your students to rely on you, the teacher, or the classroom forever, right? Instead, you should show them how to use tools like online dictionaries, concordances, vocabulary apps, etc., because these tools let them see how words are used in real contexts. And we need to bear in mind that the ultimate goal is to build learners' confidence and autonomy so that they can take control of their vocabulary learning outside the classroom context. Now here is the task for you. You can consider doing it as part of your forum activity or the journal. So you need to find a call-based vocabulary tool or adapted tool to teach vocabulary. Here is a sample website you can refer to. And the question is, how does this align with the tips suggested by Chappell and Jamieson, 2008? So you may consider some sub-questions like, does it promote learning? Does it provide interactions with computer and peers? Does it provide evaluations? What kind of evaluations? Immediate feedback or what? And also in terms of strategies, you may consider a question like, does the tool help learners develop strategies? All right. In this and the following slides, we want to have a quick discussion on MOD 2017. The article was already uploaded to your TESL 330 Moodle page. So I'm going to provide you with a... All right, here is a prompt, which is a summary of MOD 2017 generated by ChatPDF. ChatPDF is an AI-powered tool. So I'm going to give it a read that you can share. In the meantime, you can share your responses in the chat box, or if you're watching it on YouTube, you can share your opinions in the comments. All right, I'm going to give it a quick read. Technology can be a useful tool for L2 vocabulary learning and teaching. but it should be used in a way that takes into account the four-stage vocabulary learning process framework. This means that attention should be given not only to providing resources for learners to meet new words, but also to creating opportunities for subsequent encounters with these items so that many partially learned items can be consolidated or processed to a deep level so as to ensure well-developed vocabulary, L2 vocabulary items or lexical entries. I'm going to read from the largest screen here. Additionally, the prevalence of mobile technologies in many parts of the world provides ample opportunities for learners to record, reflect on, exchange, and share informal L2 vocabulary learning. Finally, vocabulary lessons sent via mobile phones, via SMS or email can be effective if they are contextualized and provide repeated exposure or spaced repetition. One of the target items with changing context to consolidate the learning as well as elaborate the meaning and use. So again, share your responses in the chat box or in the comments, and we'll talk more about it. All right, I'd like to wrap up today's session with a question for you to reflect on and possibly explore further in our upcoming forum activity on the TESL 330 Moodle page. Here it is. How does the incidental versus intentional distinction in vocabulary learning affect the choice of technology and its implementation? You may think about whether the tools we use, like flashcard apps or AI tools, should change based on whether students are learning vocabulary as a byproduct of another activity or whether they are deliberately trying to memorize and retain words. This is something we'll discuss more in class, but I'd like to encourage you to start thinking about it now and share your thoughts in the forum. All right, that is the end of the lecture. Thanks for being present and or watching the lecture. See you in the next one.